everyone and welcome back to my booktube channel, Lisa in Bookland. Let's address the elephant in the room first. This is probably the most high definition you've ever seen me, and that is because I finally have a video camera. It's actually an old camcorder we've had in the house for ages, but nobody had been using it. And there was kind of a myth that it was broken. At least everybody genuinely thought it was broken. But I pulled it out and decided to have a look and try to fix it. There was actually nothing wrong with it apart from there was no memory card in it. So yeah, I have commandeered it. I can see myself now, so I can see whether I'm in focus or not. And yeah, it's just very exciting. I feel more mobile immediately. Can frame shots, I suppose, and do all of the good stuff that I should have done like months ago. So yes, hopefully this is an improvement. I've even felt the need to put makeup on because I can see myself so much more clearly. But anyways, we'll see how long that lasts. Who knows, maybe next thing I will stop stuttering, or I will manage to cut out the those like annoying like jerky sound bits between cuts. I've no idea what happens there, but anyway, but on to the purpose of this video is my March reading wrap up. So in March I read 11 books and some other things. Some of the books I can't stop looking at myself in the viewfinder now. Some books I've already discussed in a vlog and also an individual book review I did for one of the books. I won't talk too much about those. I did read some other books more heavily weighted towards the beginning of the month, and I will say that the vast majority of these books were for the Irish Readathon. Two of them weren't, so I'll talk about those books first, and then the rest are for the Irish Readathon, as I said, which is hosted by Aoife from Words of Clover and Leanne from Leanne Rose. So yes, on to the books. The first book that wasn't part of the Irish Readathon was actually Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. This is the second book in the Barchester series. I won't go too much into it because obviously there's spoilers for the first book in this. The first book is The Warden. This is on my Victorian Literature TBR for February, so I had a half read in February. I just finished it off in March. I really enjoyed this book. Actually, unexpectedly, I think I preferred The Warden, but only because I felt like you needed to put the work in this book. There was so many characters that were kind of getting set up, and Anthony Trollope does this thing, and I know it's kind of a well-known trademark of his, he'll kind of give the whole backstory of a character. Like, so you'll be following a plot line and then he'll like leave that and introduce this new character, but like not at the moment that they come into the plot. He'll kind of give their whole life story first. There is a lot of that in this book, and it takes a bit of getting used to, and because I was enjoying the main plot line, I suppose I was a bit frustrated when other characters got pulled in, but I really did like the main plot line, as I said, and once everything was kind of set up like halfway through the book, I really enjoyed it then. So this book, it does, like The Warden, I suppose, it kind of does go a good bit into like church politics, the different factions of the church like fighting with each other over these appointments, and yeah, and like their wives get involved sometimes, and just so much fighting between everybody in this book. And yeah, one of the characters from the first book is like really unexpectedly single in this book. I definitely was not expecting that. So they have a romance plotline in this, and there's another kind of unusual lady that has like many male suitors as well. So horns are introduced, which I liked them as well, and I am really excited for Dr. Thorne, the next one, because I watched the series of that a good while ago, and although I can't really remember much about it, I do remember I really liked it. So the second book I read, it wasn't for the Irish Readathon, it was actually the last book I read of the month, and that was The Secrets of Hartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden, which was so excellent, and I'll talk about more in a second. But first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about my trip to London, because I so meant to vlog it, but I just didn't, unfortunately, for two main reasons. First of all, I didn't have this wonderful camcorder I do have now, and I honestly feel so much more mobile now that I have this, and it stays in focus no matter what I'm doing. And secondly, because I was so busy, so I actually I went by sail and rail. I got the train to Dublin on Wednesday evening, the ferry across, arriving at like midnight in Holyhead, and then the train down to London the next morning on Thursday. And it's a pity I didn't vlog it because I really enjoyed it. It was such a good experience, and there was some beautiful scenery in like North Wales, like miles and miles of beaches, but the reason I didn't vlog it or even really take any pictures is because I am so overburdened with work at the moment. I actually worked most of the trip when I was on my way down to London, but the effect was by the time I got to London I didn't have to work because I felt a bit more in control. So, but yeah, by the time I got there then, I suppose because I had been working so hard, I just wanted to enjoy myself and not be worrying about out of focus cameras or things. So yes, maybe next time. Katie's book launch is obviously the most exciting thing. You'll have seen other people's vlogs There was loads of other booktubers there. It was such a fabulous experience to meet them, and they were so very lovely. Booktubers really, and I'm sure bookish people in general are just some of the nicest people. But funnily enough, Katie wasn't even the first author I met that day. I really like this Instagrammer. Well, I know her from Instagram. Alice Loxton. She's her Instagram is History Alice, and she has written a book called Uproar about Georgian print culture, which is obviously my thing. And I was like, geez, I wonder now by any chance would she be doing a book event while I'm in London? And she was talking at London Print Fair. So yeah, I went along and I got to meet her, and she was so lovely as well. And the book is excellent, but I only finished that in April, so I won't talk about it now. But yes, other bookish things I did a small bit of book shopping, but I only really went to Foyles and a few random Waterstones, just because I knew I had enough books already. I was actually flying back to go to a football match in Dublin on the Sunday, so I had limited room in the suitcase, and also because I wanted to buy some new clothes. But yeah, they were the two main bookish things. And I also went to see Hamilton, which is absolutely amazing. It was so worth it. But yes, The Secrets of Hartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden. This is obviously known as Books and Things on BookTube. I think most of my viewers would already know her channel, so yeah, I don't even probably need to say that. But so the book launches on the 30th, and I finished it on like the afternoon of the 31st. It's quite a big thing when you're actually traveling, and like I didn't just sit down and read it all the time. It was such a brilliant read. I did probably read a lot of it as a treat because I'd been working so hard. I did book in afternoon tea at Fortnum and Mason, so I probably did read quite a big chunk of it while I was drinking tea for like 3 hours in there. But yes, it was just brilliant. I did contemplate doing a full book review of this, but I didn't really want to talk about it like too much because I kind of enjoyed not knowing a huge amount about it going in, and I think I would like everybody else to have that experience. I think if you watch Katie's videos, I really enjoyed kind of seeing her personality come out in the book. It's not an experience I suppose you'd have too often, being familiar enough with an author's taste in books, and then reading their book afterwards. But it was just kind of like an Easter egg hunt. Definitely described as having Bronte vibes, and I can't emphasize that enough. But like, it wasn't just like you'd expect. I should have said this is about a governess called Margaret Lennox who goes to this house, a very isolated house called Hartwood Hall, to be a governess to this little boy called Louis. There's various strange things in the house. People seem to think it's haunted. So the characters in the house are behaving strangely. But yeah, as I said, I just really enjoyed seeing all of the like tropes or all of the characteristics that were out of some of the Bronte novels, but like completely subverted and brought in ways that you didn't think they were going to be, and like there was twists that I just didn't guess at all. So it was just a fabulous read. The writing was brilliant. I really liked Margaret as a main character. She was so like, she's a widow, like a young widow, who's I suppose returning to work. It'd be almost like returning to work in our days, like after maternity leave, go back to her previous profession. And that was just really interesting. And I don't want to say what it is, but there's like a section in the middle that I just really loved, and I just wasn't expecting it all, and not something I've kind of seen in a lot of historical fiction. I just really enjoyed it. And yeah, just congratulations Katie on a brilliant book. I'd have enjoyed it if anybody wrote it, but I'm so glad it was her. So yeah, brilliant book. Highly recommend it if you haven't done it already. The only thing is this corner, every time I was in my bag and I took it out, I kept thinking I damaged the corner. But no, it's a beautiful copy as well. Like, look at the inside, has got like fancy end papers. But yeah, that's The Secrets of Hartwood Hall. I'll add to the like mound of praise that's out there already and encourage you highly to read it. So Irish Readathon reading, I'm doing that usual thing where I list the books in like order of when they're set or when they're written for classics. So yeah, they're not necessarily in the order I read them in. So the first Irish Readathon book that's set chronologically is this one, The Ballad of Lord Edward and Citizen Small by Neil Jordan. I did a full individual book review of this, and I actually read it in Renville, so it was contained in my holiday vlog as well, which I'll link both of them down below. And yeah, I just thought this was absolutely brilliant. So the Lord Edward of the title is Lord Edward Fitzgerald. He was the son of the Duke of Leinster, and he became involved in the United Irishmen, who had a rebellion that was kind of inspired by French and American ideals of revolution. So he'd be the well-known character in the book, but the Citizen Small is actually his kind of servant, but he's actually an escaped slave who saved Lord Edward's life in Jamaica as part of the American War of Independence, and Lord Edward brought him back with him to England and to Ireland, and this book is, I suppose, about their kind of unusual friendship or relationship, and you're seeing the events of history or of the book through Tony Small's eyes. I loved his perspective. I loved the portrayal of like late 18th century Ireland, especially as the theatre. If you're anyway interested in the 18th century or in the theatre scene, I'd highly recommend you to read this book. And yeah, I won't say any more about it because I did the fuller book review, so yeah, definitely go and watch that. It's spoiler free if you're interested in it, but this is one of my favourite books of the year. Definitely, I loved it 100%. The next book then is, I'm going to talk about them in the order that I read them, because I feel like that's the context in which I'll think about them, even if they were actually published the other way around. But there are two related ones in that they were written by the same author, and one is a short story and one is a full-length novel. So the full-length novel, which I read first in my time in Renville as well, which is also contained in that reading vlog, is Uncle Silas by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I'd be really anticipating this classic because I'd never read anything by Le Fanu before, and I thought it sounded really intriguing. So it's definitely like a sensation novel. It's about the main character is this girl called Maud. At the start of the book, she's living with her father. They live quite secluded lives, and he has got some quite, I suppose, odd connections who sometimes come and visit, and Maud doesn't really know what there is about. But the big mystery is her father's brother and Maud's uncle Silas of the title. He's been, I suppose, somewhat shunned, or like there's a lot of thought that he did something very bad, and as a result he's been kind of kicked out from society, and it's about whether he did it or not. But yeah, anyways, through various circumstances, later on in the book, Maud actually ends up getting sent to live with him and his household, which is very, I suppose, different from what she'd be used of, and yeah, has some creepy things going on. Yeah, it's very much a sensation novel. Like another part of it is Maud has this horrid governess called Madame Rougier. I did really enjoy this book. I think the one thing that kind of let it down for me, and this maybe was weirdly hammered home by the next book I'm going to talk about, is I was kind of expecting it to be more supernaturally. It's definitely more of a sensation novel, as in like there's like plots. Even the cover is kind of misleading, like has a ghost or something in it. So I maybe had expected a bit more of that. But yeah, I did really like this, especially the relationships I think that Maud has with some other women. There's an older woman called Lady Knollys, and when she goes to Uncle Silas's house with her cousin, I just really like I really like the friendship between those. But yeah, definitely very pacey and plotty and kept me reading, and if you want to see more thoughts, check out that reading vlog as well. So that book was actually based on a novella, and the novella is called A Passage in the Secret History of an Irish Countess by the same author, which is actually set in Ireland. That one is set in Derbyshire, and weirdly enough, I actually preferred the novella, I think. Potentially just, it didn't have as much character development, especially like their friendship between the women. That wasn't as fully explored in the novella, but there was some aspects of it there with the cousin. The plot was basically the same but crushed in like less pages, so it was just even more pacey, I suppose. And I actually found the ending way scarier in the novella, and I know Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading has been reading some J. Sheridan Le Fanu short stories, and I'd definitely be encouraged to check out more of this because I really liked that one. So next is actually a non-fiction, and it's this book, Troubled Times, War and Rebellion in North Galway, 1913 to 1923. So yeah, I talked about this in my TBR, but it's basically just like a local history of like a decade where an awful lot changed. It encompasses the War of Independence and the Civil War, but also, because it goes back to 1913, it covers the First World War, and I thought that was really, really interesting. I just loved the focus on one area of the country throughout those 10 years. And yeah, I suppose it's because I had something like, as I knew, I suppose, a little bit about like the War of Independence and the Civil War in Galway, but I really, really liked the focus it had on the First World War. Just I suppose, stories that are told less often, and I found that 10 men from my own town died in the First World War, which probably sounds like a small number, but it's a small town, and just when it's local to you, it's just yeah, it's just those people have really been forgotten by history, so it's nice to learn more about them. But yeah, just some brilliant photos, I suppose, of what of areas that I know well, of what they look like like 100 years ago. Some names you'd be like, I was asking my parents, oh, do you think could that have been the grandfather of such and such? The familiar names you'd be used to seeing around, or their descendants, possibly. I've never heard anybody talk about them. But yeah, lots of sad things, especially with the Civil War. I suppose there was kind of an incident in the Civil War that's being commemorated right now, where 6 anti-treaty men were executed in tubes by the Free State Army, which it's just incredibly tragic, everything that happened. But yeah, it was a really, really brilliant book, and I'm glad I've read this, and it's one I'm sure I will return to again and again. And yeah, I just love reading about local history. If I won the lotto tomorrow, I would love to go back to college, study history, and I'd love to do the same for the Napoleonic Wars in Galway. If there is documentation out there, I'd love to do it. So yeah, here's fingers crossed for me winning the lotto, guys. So I think the first book actually that I read for the Irish Readathon was this one, A Long Long Way by Sebastian Barry. This is the first Sebastian Barry I've read, and it definitely won't be the last. I absolutely thought this was a marvellous book. I see it was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize in 2005, and it was just, yeah, it deserved it. It was brilliant. It's about this Irish soldier called Willie Dunn. At the very start of the First World War, he signs up straight away. He doesn't wait to be conscripted. He has no political motives for fighting. He just it's just what he decides he wants to do. I say he has no political motives because I suppose big narrative about Irish soldiers in the First World War is whether they joined to show their loyalist credentials, or whether they joined, I suppose, to support John Redmond, who said that Irish soldiers should join the British Army to drive support for Home Rule, that they felt like we'd be rewarded afterwards. But it was really interesting because his father was a policeman, so he kind of was from a loyalist background, and yeah, just his experiences of it, and there is no details spared in this book. I think that its depiction of trench warfare was as good as Birdsong, but the characterization was first class. I just thought it was not just Willie himself, but his fellow soldiers, and also the officers he's reporting under, and just the progress. I kind of don't want to give it away at all, but the progress of the war was so evident, and just the rotation of people that went through, and yeah, I just thought that was shown really, really well. There wasn't really, to my memory, there wasn't really many specific dates or specific battles mentioned in this, so you kind of do lose track of time, but you do notice the changes in the army that Willie is in, and yeah, I just thought it was so brilliant. The position of Irish soldiers in the army in the First World War it changed so much throughout the progress of the war, and there was so many different groups. I have them written down here. Oh god, even reading it, no wonder people get confused by Irish history. So there was the Irish Volunteers, which were the proto-IRA fighting for Irish independence in Ireland, say 1916. Then there was that, not to be confused with IRB, who were kind of a secret organisation doing the same thing, and the Ulster Volunteers, who were fighting in Ireland to prevent Home Rule, and there was Redmond's Volunteers, so they were the volunteers that John Redmond encouraged to serve in the British Army to support Home Rule. And then there was the regular British Army volunteers like Willie, who were just they had volunteered for the army and weren't conscripted. So yes, it just goes into all of that in this book, as well as just being a really, really unflinching story about the First World War, and just some great character stuff as well. You feel so close to all the characters. The one thing I will say is I just wasn't overly sold on the love story, but that's often how I feel about these kind of books. So yeah, what can you do? Just not to my taste. I can't wait to check out more Sebastian Barry. I keep getting him confused with Sebastian Fox. Not to be confused, the two of them, but yeah. The next one is Snow by John Banville, which is the first in a series of mysteries called the St. John Strafford Mysteries. It's set in, I think, the 20s, and it's set in this crumbling big country house that's owned by the Osbornes, who are aristocrats, I suppose, quite degraded aristocrats, and a Catholic priest is actually murdered in their house at night, and it becomes apparent that somebody in the house has done the deed. And yeah, so just really good murder mystery, brilliant characters. I really like St. John Strafford. I just really, really like John Banville's writing style, and would read anything more by him. So yeah, I think Quirk comes into it more later in the series as well, which would be exciting. One of the things I really liked about this book as well is there's a really great sibling dynamic in it, between the brother and the sister, and I suppose the way they communicate, and yeah, I just really, really liked it. So yeah, brilliant, brilliant book for many reasons. So next up is quite a new release, and that is My Father's House by Joseph O'Connor, another famous author who hasn't read anything from before. So this is a thriller that's set in occupied Rome during the Second World War, and it's all about this priest called Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, who is along with this group of people who include Norman Italians, some ex-soldiers, shopkeepers, just everybody who are trying to get refugees who come to them out of Italy and into Switzerland. But the main part of this book, really, it's set over quite a short period of time, like probably 2 or 3 days, and it's all about this big mission that they're trying to pull off. And it's just, I wasn't expecting it to be such a thriller, a historical thriller, but a thriller nonetheless. It starts off, oh, what a start. I mentioned there's a big mission and it's entrusted to one specific person, and like the night before the mission, this person is after having their appendix burst, and they obviously can't do it anymore. So yeah, just what an opening, and just so much tension throughout the whole novel. It's kind of interspersed with these transcripts from characters within the book who are real people. It's all based on a real story, even though I'm not sure if this actual event took place, but you know, the idea is based on a real story. So you know throughout it that some of them survive, but they don't all appear at the start, so you don't know if anybody is going to die in the process of carrying out this very dangerous work. And yeah, just so inspiring again, and that it's based on a true story. You always think to yourself, would I ever be that brave, or what would you do in the same situation? I think it's inevitable with reading these books. But yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. Such a thrilling read, and I read it like in the course of a day or something. Kind of weird thing to say when it's like occupied Rome, but I really liked the portrayal of Italy and the Vatican. I just thought the parts about the Vatican were interesting, and yeah, just really, really enjoyed this book. Brilliant, brilliant. So the Maeve Binchy I had on my TBR was Tara Road, but I had just had a really busy month and I felt like I couldn't tackle that big of a book, which is a pity. I'm just after realising I forgot to say which books match which prompts. I'll put it down in the description box. But anyways, this was for the one over 500 pages, and sadly I didn't meet that prompt because I got a few chapters in. I was just like, I just don't have time for such a long book. So I did pick up a different one instead, which is also on my shelf, which is Silver Wedding. So this was a grand book. I read it on the ferry when I wasn't working, and I got through it. However, it was a bit disappointing, I'll say, because there was so many things. It was that usual Maeve Binchy thing where it's following loads of different characters and then they like are linked up in some way in the end, but it just wasn't as linked up as I'd kind of expected. I nearly felt like there was chapters missing with some of the characters. That kind of, you know, a lot of events had happened off page, and in particular one young man who, you know, wasn't a very likable character and did, you know, some things that you definitely wouldn't like at all. He was kind of dropped. You never found out what happened to him. And that was one of the more interesting plot lines. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed in that, but at the same time it was a nice read. There was part of it was set in a bookshop, which is nice, even though, you know, it wasn't, I wouldn't say that it was a book about a bookshop or anything. But yeah, just the fact that it is so much shorter than her usual books, it's almost like, yeah, it just didn't feel complete. It was odd. But yeah, no, that was Silver Wedding. I'll keep going with Maeve Binchy, and I was enjoying the few chapters of Tara Road I did read, so I'll definitely be going to that. It's not being counted as a DNF or anything. However, now might be a good time to mention one book I did DNF, and that's The Gathering by Anne Enright. So I talked about it more in my vlog as well, but yeah, I listened to it on CD when I was driving out to Renville and back, and although it was grand, it was just really literary. I think it did win the Booker Prize. It was the perfect book to read while I was driving, because you didn't really need to pay an awful lot of attention. If you missed a chapter, it wouldn't really impact the whole story because it was so rambling. It was about this woman who was very attached to her brother, and the brother has died, but and she's like going to England to organise to get his body sent home and organise the funeral, and her relationship with her siblings and with her parents, and even her grandparents. It kind of goes back in time as well. I did kind of like the grandparents story, but again, it was just so rambly. Yeah, just not for me. Like, I could have finished it, but I just didn't bother because it was on audio, and it just, yeah, I just wasn't bothered to read the rest of it. So yeah, Sorry, I'm just not smart enough for that book. I did not think I read that many books this month, but we're nearly done. So the next book then was a long-term TBR for me. I think since 2006. I got it for Christmas from my parents. Oh my god, I told my mother what it was about afterwards. And she was like, and I gave it to you for Christmas when you were 13. She's not a reader herself, but anyways, yes. Take a Look at Me Now by Anisha Notaro. Yeah, it did meet the prompt. I'll say it now when I remember it. This definitely would have met the prompt for like commercial fiction, but very dated commercial fiction. I don't think anybody's going to read this book. I'll give some mild spoilers here because it's quite entertaining. So it's about this woman called Lily, whose sister has drowned, and the sister has left behind a son who's like 3 or 4, I think. And anyways, his guardianship is being left to Lily, who slowly starts to discover things about her sister's life. So she finds, I think, was it an address book that the sister had, and there's the numbers of all of these men in it. And basically she organises interviews with all the men, and just asking them how she, talking to them about her sister. But what she doesn't know, but we know as the reader, is that the sister had basically been a prostitute, having long-term relationships with these men. I feel like she should have guessed that a lot sooner, but that's why it's funny that my mother gave this book to me to read when I was 13. And thankfully I read about 5 or 6 chapters and I'm like, this is really boring. So I'm only reading it now. What I thought was like funny, or not funny really, was, as I say, her sister drowned and the son was actually with her when she drowned. He was just rescued by helicopter and she didn't make it. And whenever he sees the sea, obviously that was really traumatic, and whenever he sees the sea, he cries and becomes very distressed. The one time that they did go to the beach, Lily decided that would be a good idea. But what Lily is going for throughout the whole book is she really wants to buy a cottage by the sea, and in the end she does. And she just doesn't seem to think that'll bother Charlie at all. Like, it's so funny. Just Lily is so, like, she's always like, oh, her sister was the one that organised everything, and she was, but like Lily has such like learned helplessness. Like, it was a grand read. I did finish it. It was quite quick. But yeah, I won't be rereading it again. So the last book I'm going to mention then is the first book in a series as well. It's another thriller series, and it is called The Guards by Ken Bruin. It's the first in his Jack Taylor series, and I wanted to read these books for ages because they are set in Galway, and so this was released in 2004, so they're kind of contemporary thrillers set in Galway. And Jack Taylor is an ex-guard. He was discharged from the guards basically for assaulting a superior, and he descends into alcoholism, but he is very intelligent. He's approached one day by this woman who said that her daughter committed suicide, but she doesn't believe it was a suicide, and she wants him to look into it. So he kind of becomes an unofficial private investigator, drags in some of his friends into it. Now, I would say as a thriller, it wasn't very satisfying at all. I feel like the end doesn't tie up or anything, but as a character study, it was absolutely brilliant. Jack was such an intriguing character, very troubled, but I suppose he was trying to abstain from the alcohol at times, and he'd get pulled back in, or but I just loved it. It was set in Galway. Like, it's just, I've never read a book that was set in like contemporary Galway before, and just everything was so recognisable, if not from now, at least from 10 years ago. And just the cafe, he went to Elle's Cafe for lunch, and I was like, oh my god, remember Elle's? And he mentioned Griffin's as well. Oh, R.I.P. Griffin's, that was the best cafe in Galway. But yes, it was very kind of weirdly formatted as well, like the text to be kind of going diagonally in the page at times. It was very unusual thriller. Is thriller even the word for it? I don't know. But yeah, I'll definitely be continuing with the Jack Taylor series when I'm in the mood for a thriller, because I really, really enjoyed it. So that's all the books that I finished in March. I did read some other things which I'll mention briefly here. So I read some short stories from this collection, the Oxford Book of Irish Short Stories. The definite standouts were actually Green Tea by Sheridan Le Fanu. I thought that was so creepy, much creepier than Uncle Silas. And it was about this doctor. It was about this man that was kind of possessed by the devil. I just thought that was so creepy. Also, Albert Nobbs by George Moore was really interesting. It's about a woman who is disguising herself as a man to work as a servant, and she may be a lesbian. It's not really clear. The Sphinx Without a Secret by Oscar Wilde was predictably brilliant. So yeah, I'll keep going with this book throughout the year, I think, and include it in the number of books once I've it finished. I also read some poetry by W.B. Yeats. Definitely not a favourite poet of mine. Like, I suppose I do have quite simple taste in poetry. Nature and classics, just not hugely my thing. The two poems I liked most that I read probably could have been predicted: Easter 1916 and An Irish Airman Foresees His Death. So I suppose I like poems that are like about events or like, you know, historical things, but not classics. I don't know, but yeah, so I'm glad I did read some W.B. Yeats, being such a famous poet, but just not a favourite for me. So yeah, as I said, I haven't DNF'd Tara Road permanently. I'm not counting it as currently reading either. I'll probably just start again when I do pick it up. I'm in the middle of Lawrence Bloomfield in Ireland, which is a long classic poem, a narrative poem by William Allingham, and I'm really enjoying that. I'm 2 chapters into Alilu Bapchuaji, and yeah, this is just one I kind of read a bit here and there, and yeah, I'm enjoying it as well. I'm enjoying flexing my Irish muscles, and I'm finding it easier than I would have expected, actually, so that's very encouraging. Obviously, it's a book written for teenagers, so I'm sure the language is a bit simpler, and you know, with that in mind, but yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to try it again. The read gave me a fright there. So yeah, that's it. Do let me know what you read for the Irish Readathon, and yeah, I'll stick some vloggy kind of type footage in if I think of it at the end, if I have anything useful. And yes, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for my next video.